Someone once said it is difficult to get people to understand something when their salary depends upon not understanding it. Why has it become so dangerous to seek help from the medical industry? Perhaps the best place to start is by looking at that nearly 3 trillion number we've been speaking of. The pharmaceutical companies view your symptoms and see dollar signs. They spend billions every year advertising to you on TV and magazines to help their drugs find their way into your body. There's a $5 billion expense on direct-to-consumer marketing, of course. You've seen the ads showing silver-haired men grabbing their spouses with a knowing look in their eye, or the woman with a little black rain cloud over her head, a symbol of depression, that magically transforms into a rainbow after she takes a pill. Their oversimplified presentations, complete with long lists of side effects, have people feeling they know all there is to know about a drug after a minute-long commercial. So they march into their doctor's offices expecting a prescription. Even with the threat of numerous possible side effects, the lure of being able to simply take a pill and have a troublesome symptom magically disappear is just too alluring for many people to resist. But if you don't buy what they're selling in their commercials, they spend another $16 billion every year to market to physicians, so they'll use drugs as a primary solution to most of the health problems people have. Many people are completely unaware of the many ways in which they are being manipulated into taking dangerous and oftentimes completely unnecessary drugs. Mark Twain once observed, "It's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they have been fooled." Exposing pharmaceutical dangers can be quite hazardous in and of itself, as documents uncovered during a class action lawsuit filed against Merck revealed disturbing plans to neutralize, destroy, and discredit doctors who warned about the dangers of Vioxx. As reported on CBSNews.com, one email from a Merck executive said about a doctor who disliked prescribing Vioxx, "We may need to seek them out and destroy them where they live," quote unquote. It's quite clear that both doctors and the public at large are being manipulated for the sake of corporate profits. The pharmaceutical industry is not really in the business of promoting health. Instead, it makes money off disease, a kind of disease management system rather than what we call healthcare system, or perhaps a symptom management system. As it has been said, a patient cured is a customer lost. And when one market begins to dwindle, it simply creates a new one by inventing yet another disease, usually by upgrading a common symptom to disease status. Need convincing? Keep listening. As CNN reported, in order to market its antidepressant Paxil, GlaxoSmithKline hired a PR, public relations firm, to create a public awareness campaign about, quote-unquote, underdiagnosed disease. The disease? Social anxiety disorder, previously known as shyness. You may have seen this campaign firsthand. Ads stating, "Imagine being allergic to people," were distributed widely. Celebrities gave interviews to the press, and psychiatrists gave lectures on this new disease in the top 25 media markets. As a result, mentions of social anxiety in the press rose from about 50 to more than 1 billion in just 2 years. Social anxiety disorder became the third most common mental illness in the United States, and Paxil skyrocketed to the top of the charts as one of the most profitable and most prescribed drugs here. And that's just one example among so very many, including the pushes to sell drugs that treat high cholesterol, statin drugs such as Lipitor and Crestor, and acid reflux, two conditions that are much more effectively treated with simple dietary changes. Physicians, sometimes unwittingly, also play a major role in the massive pharmaceutical deception perpetrated on the public, but their manipulations are often more obscure. Drug reps often give quote-unquote gifts to persuade doctors to prescribe the medications that they represent. These drug reps usually have no medical or scientific education. Instead, they're armed with some incredibly potent persuasion techniques. Although the medical industry has established rules that limit face-to-face interactions between drug reps and doctors, drug companies influence doctor choices in numerous other ways, including sponsoring medical conferences and sponsoring third-party websites intended to provide quote-unquote non-denominational information about new drugs. The method of indoctrination most difficult to detect is the education that doctors give to other doctors. A pharmaceutical company will pay individual doctors large fees to quote-unquote educate their colleagues about the benefits of a particular drug. Here, it's very easy for the doctor receiving the material to forget that the doctor presenting it is working on the drug company's behalf and not as an independent, well-educated, appropriate source of objective information. Some of their former paid shills from the mid-1980s explained to me how it works. The company would pay for their travel expenses and give them checks for as much as $5,000 for speaking. That may not seem like much to some people now, but decades ago, for someone just graduating school with loads of debt, it was a major sum. It was a heroic-looking system, too, as you may feel that you are doing good and being paid to share your hard-earned knowledge, when the reality is that you are merely feeding the researchers fake science and forced results, bought and paid for by the drug companies so they can sell more drugs. And then there's the insidious drug industry-sponsored so-called education that takes place in medical schools across the United States. For example, in 2015, out of Harvard's 8,900 professors and lecturers, 1,600 admitted that they or a family member had ties to drug companies that could bias their teaching or research. In 1 year alone, the pharmaceutical industry contributed more than $11.5 million to Harvard for, quote, research and continuing education classes, end quote. This occurred in virtually every medical institution in the United States and was a massively effective way to indoctrinate budding physicians. By influencing the recognized thought leaders of medicine, drug companies could outrageously influence the entire profession. This, combined with the previously discussed marketing efforts and their political lobbying to change the laws to their advantage. As a patient, you don't have to fall victim to these tactics. You can learn to see right through the propaganda and stop being deceived by drug company lies and deceptions. Chances are your doctor, even if he or she has good intentions and a desire to heal, not harm, has fallen prey to pharmaceutical marketing tactics. Most doctors simply do not have the time to research each drug, and they rely heavily on information from their pharmaceutical reps and from other quote-unquote experts, that is, doctors who are receiving significant fees from the drug companies to promote drug treatments. One of our main goals in sharing this kind of information is to keep you out of the doctor's office as much as possible and out of the hospital for anything but acute traumas. Our medical system can be spectacularly effective in these instances. America has some of the best EMTs and emergency rooms in the world. However, you absolutely can take charge of your long-term health. You don't have to fall prey to the modern medical industrial complex or the insidious insurance companies or the legalized drug dealing from the pharmaceutical companies. So how did we get so sick in the first place? The 21st century has brought about tremendous progress in technology, transforming culture, the way we communicate, even the way we think. It's an exciting, paradigm-shifting time in history. But it's also a time fraught with lurking dangers. Developments in technology have impacted our food supply, introducing genetically modified crops, processed foods that offer little or no nutritive value, pesticide-laden fruits and vegetables, and an over-reliance on just a handful of crops due to government farming policies and tax-funded subsidies. On top of these factors, today much of our food is pasteurized, irradiated, fumigated, and sterilized to the point that the good bacteria, the probiotics upon which we rely for our very existence, can no longer survive. Ironically, the very advances that represent all that is modern in the world, hand sanitizers, treated water, factory farming, have created their own set of diseases. For example, triclosan, an antibacterial chemical used in many soaps and hand sanitizers, has been shown to kill human cells, and even the FDA admits it acts as an endocrine disruptor in animals. When combined with chlorinated water, it produces chloroform, a probable carcinogen according to the EPA. Scientists are now connecting the sudden increase in neurological disorders and autoimmune disease and the steadily inclining rates of obesity with these changes to our food supply and the greater changes in our environment. Although plenty of alleged research is being done supposedly searching for cures, a pernicious force is working just as hard to perpetuate the very conditions that are making so many people ill: greed. Remember, from the perspective of the pharmaceutical companies and medical industry, a patient cured is a customer lost. And it's just as easy to buy a scientist as it is to buy a politician. Sadly, many scientists have displayed a tendency to make sure their findings agree with the desired outcome of whoever is funding their research. There's way more money to be made in the business of disease management than in actually curing disease. We're fond of exposing how much the drug, chemical, and junk food industries spend to manipulate and distort our perceptions. By the year 2015, the drug companies were spending more than $21 billion a year. However, the food industry was spending twice that much to persuade you and your children to choose highly processed convenience foods that would accelerate a massive decline in your health and facilitate your need to use drugs to control the resulting symptoms, of course. A whopping 90% of the foods that Americans purchased every year were processed foods. In a typical year, 2,800 new candies, desserts, ice creams, and snacks were introduced to the marketplace, compared with just 230 new fruits or vegetable products. Food marketers do a masterful job at making fast foods and junk foods seem like a wise choice. They're relatively inexpensive, they taste relatively good, and they make serving dinner a snap. No longer do you need to actually clean or chop a vegetable. Simply pop their prepared boxes of food into the microwave and you're ready to go. Frozen vegetables are the one exception, as they can be a healthful option if your choices of local vegetables are limited due to weather or geography. Frozen fruits and vegetables are usually frozen quickly after harvesting and so have much of their nutrients preserved. What the food industry neglected to tell you is that you pay a heavy price for consuming a terrible diet. The overconsumption of these fake, ultra-processed foods is one of the major causes of a slew of chronic diseases facing the United States, both physical as well as mental and emotional. Why do they make these foods if they are so terrible? One particular event in 1999 is an especially potent piece of the answer, as chronicled in an article in the New York Times in Minneapolis on April 8, 1999. The CEOs of 11 major food companies, including Nestle, Kraft, Nabisco, General Mills, Coca-Cola, Mars, and Procter & Gamble, gathered at Pillsbury's headquarters to discuss the obesity epidemic. Many who attended weren't there to talk about how to end the obesity epidemic. Rather, they were there to discuss how to defend themselves against claims that they were responsible in large part for creating it. At the time, Kraft was a subsidiary of Philip Morris, and their awareness of the role they played was thoroughly and smartly discussed in Michael Moss's Salt, Sugar, Fat As Philip Morris came under pressure for nicotine and cigarettes, it eventually started looking at the food divisions in light of the emerging obesity crisis. And there were moments in these internal documents where Philip Morris officials were saying to the food division, you guys are going to face a problem with salt, sugar, and fat in terms of obesity of the same magnitude, if not more, than what we're facing with smoking right now. And you've got to start thinking about this issue and how you're going to deal with that. Yet still, most processed foods remain loaded with sugar, which has been shown to have devastating effects on overall health in the form of insulin resistance, which is a precursor to nearly every chronic disease. Increased markers of heart disease, such as triglycerides and the harmful form of cholesterol, and the development of fat in and around the abdominal organs, which is also a major predictor of chronic disease. High levels of sugar consumption are also linked with obesity, diabetes, and cancer. Cancer feeds on sugar as its primary food source. Even worse, these harmful foods are designed to be so tasty that they short-circuit your normal feelings of satiety, making you crave more and more of them. In fact, sugary processed foods have been shown to trigger the same pathways in the brain associated with drug addiction. One study found that rats, when given the choice between a sugary solution and cocaine, preferred the sugary solution, even rats with a history of drug use. For the sake of convenience or short-term taste now, many have traded their health, both short-term and long-term quality of life. If you consume mainstream media and their manipulative messaging, you may be convinced that all you need to do is switch from one processed food to another, like from regular soda to diet soda, or from regular cookies to low-fat cookies, or from white bread to whole wheat bread. I know how alluring a lie it is, but healing is not going to come from companies that love profit more than people. Year after year, ultra-processed food companies have proven they value money over mankind and are interested in one thing only: selling more of the foods they produce. They have sunk to criminal behavior to keep their bottom lines rather than their customers healthy. At some point in the future, the junk food industry will find itself in a similar position to the cigarette and vaping industries, acknowledging their role in the long-term consequences of disease and death for millions of their consumers. There is a way out. We have the power to not only stop disease, but also to harness technology for our own good and our family's good. All we need is information, accurate information, much of which is freely available online if you just know where to look. Your body is equipped with powerful healing mechanisms that will typically self-correct most health problems if you provide it with the nutrients it was designed for and requires, and simply remove the excess toxins. Effortless healing is available. It means getting out of your body's way and letting it naturally do what God created it to do. Your body was designed to be healthy. If you believed the media, you would think you were just a disaster waiting to happen and in need of the magical prescription from your doctor. However, nothing could be further from the truth. If you supply your body with an optimal diet and avoid exposure to the ever-increasing threats of toxins, then your body, following its design, will move toward health and away from disease without any conscious effort. Your body is typically on autopilot to self-heal. For example, when you fall down and bruise yourself, aside from making sure you clean any open wounds to prevent any infections, you don't need to do anything more to get better. Your body has a built-in repair system to take care of the damage. Effortless healing is not about self-deprivation. Many people have claimed that if they can't eat their favorite junk foods, they are feeling deprived. However, the sooner we change our eating habits, the better our chances of increased energy, normalized weight, a better mood, and improved health are overall. Subsisting on junk foods alone is a surefire way to accelerate your aging process and compromise your health and overall quality of life, as well as memory, thought processing, emotional states. But your body has an innate desire to feel better, as we've said, to be able to do and enjoy more. When we honor that desire by preparing our own food, gathering our own information, making our own choices about what is truly healthy for our individual bodies, it will reward us with the support we need to keep going strong. One primary factor for our prayerful consideration is the fasting insulin level. Insulin is a hormone produced in the pancreas that regulates the amount of sugar in the blood. Insulin is absolutely essential to staying alive. But the sad fact is that many consuming modern diets have too much and have developed insulin resistance. This state is pushing them toward chronic degenerative illness, and it's increasing the rate at which they age. Most adults have about 1 gallon of blood in their bodies and are quite surprised to learn that in that gallon there is only 1 teaspoon of sugar. If the total amount of sugar in your blood were to rise to 1 tablespoon, you would quickly go into hyperglycemic coma and die. Your body works very hard to prevent this by producing insulin to keep your blood sugar from rising dangerously high. Any meal or snack high in grain or sugar carbohydrates typically generates a rise in your blood glucose. To compensate, your pancreas secretes insulin into your bloodstream, which then lowers your blood sugar. If you've been consuming a diet consistently high in sugar and grains, over time your body's insulin receptors have become sensitized to insulin and require more and more insulin to get the job done. Eventually, you become insulin resistant. If you don't change your diet, you'll likely also become diabetic and have a far higher risk of heart disease, stroke, cancer, and Alzheimer's. Even worse, high insulin levels suppress 2 other important hormones, glucagon and growth hormone, that are responsible for burning fat and sugar and promoting muscle development, respectively. So insulin from excess carbohydrates promotes fat, then impairs your body's ability to burn that fat. To find out your insulin levels, the test you need to ask for is a fasting blood insulin test. This test is done by just about every commercial laboratory and is relatively inexpensive. You can safely ignore the reference ranges from the lab, as they are based on quote-unquote normals of a population that has highly disturbed insulin levels. A normal fasting blood insulin level is below 5, but ideally you'll want to be below 3. Remember, this must be a fasting test, as it has little value if you weren't fasting. Another primary principle for us on the way to health is drinking pure water. Making sure you drink enough pure water is one of the most important and powerful steps we can take for good health. Consuming soda, diet soda, commercial fruit juices, and sports drinks seriously disturbs our body's metabolism. However, tap water and many bottled waters and even well water can often be contaminated with many toxins, making a filter essential. You will either use a filter or be a filter. The choice is yours. We recommend either a distiller or a reverse osmosis filter. Then we recommend adding a few drops of trace minerals into the filtered water before drinking it. Because you are exposed to these toxins when you bathe, investing in a water filter for your shower is another powerful way to reduce your toxic load. About 2/3 of your body is made up of water. Your cells, organs, muscles, and even your brain are approximately 70% water. The water in your body is the main delivery system for nutrients and oxygen, as well as the power behind its waste removal system. If there isn't enough water to flush away your toxic wastes, they will damage your body. Water also aids in energy production and keeps your joints lubricated. Water is absolutely imperative for your body to function. People can live for weeks without food, but only days without water. One of the most exciting aspects of this principle is that if you get the fluid water replacement issue right, then you have taken one of the most important and powerful steps you can in owning your health. This applies not only to the water you drink, but to the water you use while bathing. The major symptoms of dehydration are fatigue, thirst, dark-colored urine, chapped lips and dry skin, digestive disturbances such as heartburn and constipation, frequent urinary tract infections and kidney stones, premature aging, more noticeable wrinkles, high blood pressure, headaches. These are symptoms that show up when we're not properly hydrated with pure water. As of 2015, the average person in the United States was drinking 57 gallons of soda per year. One of the most important health steps the average person can take is to stop drinking any type of soda or sports drink or pasteurized juices and switch to pure water. If you're already there, then all you'll need to do is to improve the quality of the water you're drinking. Though by now most people are aware that sodas are laced with processed sugars like high fructose corn syrup or cancer-causing artificial sweeteners, many don't know that their sports and vitamin drinks contain similar sweeteners, plus a whole host of frightening extras: neurotoxic aluminum from the cans, toxic chemicals like chlorine, fluoride, phthalates, BPA, and disinfection byproducts known as DBPs, disinfection byproducts, are produced when the chlorine used to disinfect water reacts with organic materials in the water to form hundreds of different toxins that are many times more toxic than the original chlorine alone. Sadly, many people have fallen victim to savvy marketers who use meaningless words like quote-unquote natural or healthy, and the people then wrongly assume that they're drinking something that's good for them. It's easy to get confused about the quality of your beverages if you aren't paying attention to the details, which is what happened to Brenda. Brenda was in her late 50s and very active, but she was about 30 pounds overweight. I did not know it at the time, but she was on a shopping bag full of prescription drugs for rheumatoid arthritis, depression, pain, and lack of energy. Her doctor never gave her any guidance on nutrition, but she thought she was eating a pretty healthy diet. She was on her own in selecting what would be best for her to drink. Because she worked outdoors in the summer heat, she needed to drink a lot. One day she was drinking a sports drink because she thought it would give her more energy. However, the ingredients contained in this drink included nothing particularly drinkable: a patented flame retardant called brominated vegetable oil, BVO, as well as artificial sweeteners, artificial colorings, and loads of high fructose corn syrup. Unable to stop myself, the doctor and me took over. I quickly showed her the list of ingredients, which included glucose and fructose, glycerol, esters of wood, sucralose, etc., and explained to her that what she thought was a health drink was similar to soda, except it was worse because it stimulates the body to crave even more sugary fixes. My guess is that Brenda was not alone in that. Millions of people were similarly confused. Happily, Brenda listened to me and started drinking filtered water with a few drops of trace minerals added in. After only a few months with this change, she lost almost 30 pounds, had more energy, and stopped taking nearly half the medications she had been on. Remember, the only step she took was to change the fluids she was drinking. Poisons in a bottle. Before you reach for that soda, diet soda, sports drink, or some supposed health drink, familiarize yourself with some of the ingredients you're likely to imbibe. Some of the most troublesome are artificial sweeteners. Consider aspartame, sold under the brand names NutraSweet and Equal. Diet soda, which often combines aspartame and caffeine, is a powerfully addictive beverage. These two agents create a unique combination of excitotoxins that can kill off some of your brain cells. However, before they do, they give you something akin to a buzz. It's the perfect plan to get you to go back to the store to buy another soda. And maybe a supersized soda. After all, it has 0 calories, no matter how much you consume. But not so fast. You're sipping your way into a trap. Consider that aspartame causes formaldehyde to build up in your tissues, which results in all sorts of potentially serious medical problems, including headaches, visual disturbances, migraines, autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis, seizures, cognitive problems, fatigue, symptoms similar to Parkinson's disease, symptoms similar to attention deficit disorder. The food industry claims that aspartame is safe. However, if you look at the studies that claim to support aspartame's safety, you will see that 90% of them were funded by the food and beverage industry. Follow the money if you want to know the truth, as all good detectives know. Independent aspartame studies tell a different story. 90% of them have found serious health problems related to aspartame. Most people drink diet soda to keep weight off. However, a 2014 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition analyzed food and nutrition records that followed study participants for a period of 10 years. It found that overweight and obese people drank significantly more artificially sweetened beverages than people of a healthy weight. It also showed that overweight and obese people who regularly drank these quote-unquote diet beverages consumed more calories from food than overweight and obese people who drank beverages sweetened with sugar. The net effect, drinking diet soda leads to weight gain, not weight loss. Aspartame is just one toxic additive that has become an integral part of the beverages that line ever more aisles at grocery stores. Here are some of the other ingredients to be avoided. Propylene glycol. This water-soluble syrupy liquid is used as a base solution for various oils and packaged foods, fragrances, antifreeze, coolants, and pharmaceutical products. It also is a solvent for food colors and flavors, while the FDA has classified it as, quote, generally recognized as safe, GRAS, as an additive for food products. Exposure to it can potentially result in cell mutations, skin, liver, and kidney damage if ingested in high enough amounts. The Environmental Working Group, EWG, rates propylene glycol as a low to moderate hazard. Sucralose is another, previously listed as safe by the Center for Science in the Public Interest. This artificial sweetener, commonly known as Splenda, was downgraded to caution after a 2013 animal study linked it to a higher risk of developing leukemia. It also has been implicated either in clinical studies or on Splenda sickness blogs as a cause of respiratory difficulties, migraines, gastrointestinal problems, heart palpitations, and weight gain. The list of reported problems is growing by the day. Another is acylfame potassium, acylfame K. This artificial sweetener contains methylene chloride, which has been linked to kidney tumors, headaches, depression, nausea, mental confusion, liver effects, and visual disturbances, as well as cancer in humans. Also, food dyes. These coloring agents have been connected to a variety of health problems, including allergic reactions, hyperactivity, decreased IQ in children, and numerous forms of cancer. Another is polysorbate 60. This ethoxylated emulsifying agent is rated as a low to moderate health concern by the Environmental Working Group. It can be contaminated with ethylene oxide and other carcinogenic industrial pollutants. Also, brominated vegetable oil, BVO, another emulsifying agent. BVO is banned in more than 100 countries, but in the United States, it is added to about 15% of all sodas to prevent citrus flavoring from separating and floating to the surface. This vegetable oil, typically derived from corn or soy, is bonded with the element bromine and was first patented as a flame retardant. Bromines are common endocrine disruptors. I'm convinced that for the typical American, and maybe for you and many of your friends and family, the most important health step you can take is to stop drinking soda, diet soda, sports drinks, pasteurized juices, and artificially flavored, sweetened waters and vitamin waters, and replace them with filtered water, which can be made even better, once again, if you purchase a little bottle of trace minerals and add a few drops to your filtered water before drinking it. If you are currently drinking soda and feel that its addictive pull will be hard to break, here are some tips on how to eliminate this beverage or various other juices and sports drinks. Knowledge is power. Learning that these unhealthy drinks not only pump your body full of sugars or artificial sweeteners, which are equally if not more dangerous, but also produces dehydration and typically reduces the amount of healing water you drink, may help you break away. How do you do it? Just spend a little time each day or each week doing a little alternative health research. It can provide enough information to shift your motivation, start to change your desires just by hearing a little more truth. We hear what we want to hear, and the more we hear something, the more inclined we are to believe it and act upon it. If you are drinking 3 or more cans of soda a day, you may develop a caffeine withdrawal headache, since most sodas are loaded with caffeine. The best way to know how quickly to reduce your intake is to listen to your body. A simple strategy for weaning ourselves off unhealthy foods and drinks is to reduce our intake to 0 gradually over a few weeks, decreasing our intake by a small amount every day until we stop altogether. A good rule of thumb is to aim for a 5 to 10% reduction every day. So if you're drinking 6 12-ounce cans, 72 ounces a day, you can reduce it by 3 to 7 ounces a day. At that rate, you would be off soda in 10 to 20 days. Please remember that this is just a range. You may need to go more slowly if you're experiencing withdrawal symptoms like headaches. If your cravings seem too strong and you feel unable to wean yourself off of unhealthy beverages, sodas, sports drinks, etc., then you can seek supernatural help from God by listening to healthy spiritual teachings. We access God's miracle working power by hearing more about His ability and His desire to provide it in every area of our lives, because the blood of Jesus has made us worthy to receive all of God's blessings in Christ. We have many videos explaining these matters in depth. Now, if you are searching for healthy water on the shelves of your grocery store, here is a guide to some of the worst offenders. Bottled water. If you think you're getting pure water from a bottle, don't be too sure. An independent test performed by the Environmental Working Group found a whopping 38 low-level contaminants in bottled water. Each of the 10 tested brands contained an average of 8 chemicals: DBPs, caffeine, Tylenol, nitrate, industrial chemicals, arsenic, and bacteria were all detected. Another concern is the bottle itself. Most plastic water bottles contain phthalates and BPA, which mimics hormones in your body. I recommend drinking water from glass bottles whenever possible. The market has also been flooded with quote-unquote functional waters, fortified supposedly with everything from vitamins and minerals to electrolytes, oxygen, fiber, even protein. Supermarket beverages and aisles can entice you with a virtual sea of beverage choices: energy drinks, health teas, juices, vitamin waters, fitness waters, and sports electrolyte concoctions in every imaginable color and flavor. But if you take a look at the labels, you'll discover that the manufacturers are spiking the punch with a lot of unsavory ingredients like high fructose corn syrup, sucralose, aspartame, and many other substances capable of wreaking havoc on our bodies, some of which are outright dangerous. If you aren't already a label reader, it's time to become one, lest you fall prey to these clever marketing ploys. Flashy labels, pretty colors, and seductive scents are incredibly alluring, especially to children. Sports drinks. In general, most so-called sports drinks have been a nutritional disaster. A healthy alternative to sports drinks is to simply add a small amount of natural unprocessed salt, such as Himalayan salt, to your regular drinking water. Typically a pinch or a quarter teaspoon per liter is just fine. Unlike processed salt, natural salt contains many different minerals and trace minerals that your body needs for optimal hydration and function. In the United States, at least, tap water is virtually pathogen-free, and you will not get nasty infections like diarrhea and such other symptoms from it, as you would in many countries around the world. While tap water is superior to most sodas and sports drinks, it is also generally loaded with a large number of toxic ingredients that may contribute to health problems. Let's consider disinfection byproducts, DBPs. Chlorine or chloramines have been added to most municipal water supplies to sterilize the water. Chlorine by itself could be considered relatively safe, but it interacts with organic material in the water to form more than 600 DBPs, disinfection byproducts. These chlorinated organic chemical toxins include 4 primary compounds commonly referred to as trihalomethanes, which again are 1,000 times more toxic than chlorine itself. In fact, trihalomethanes have no safe level, which explains why DBPs, which have been linked to liver, kidney, and nervous system problems, are some of the worst toxins in most tap water in the United States. Also, fluoride. For many decades, we've been told fluoride was essential for healthy teeth. We're now finding this is not true. In fact, researchers from Harvard Medical School added fluoride to the list of top developmental neurotoxins in 2014. You may be surprised to learn that the fluoride that is added to our water supplies is actually hydrofluorosilicic acid, a hazardous waste product from the wet scrubbing systems of the fertilizer industry. Fluoride is the only drug that is forced as mass medication on the population with no control of dosing. In addition, 99% of all fluoride never touches your teeth. It literally goes down the drain via your dishwasher, sinks, and tub and into the environment. Even with so little fluoride making it into our mouths, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, has admitted that due to the excess fluoride in our food and water, 41% of adolescents now have dental fluorosis, a condition that occurs from an excess of fluoride. The United States is far behind the curve when it comes to fluoridation. In Western Europe, 97% of the population drinks non-fluoridated water. According to data gathered by the World Health Organization and the Fluoride Action Network, there is no discernible difference in tooth decay between developed countries that fluoridate their water and those that do not. Once again, these are the findings of the World Health Organization and the Fluoride Action Network. Even in North America, water fluoridation has come under increasing scrutiny since 2010. More than 90 US and Canadian communities have voted to end water fluoridation. The issue is heating up as more and more people begin to demand water that does not expose them to this highly toxic industrial waste product. Many people assume that consuming fluoride is an issue that involves only your dental health. But nearly 36 human studies and 100 animal studies have shown that fluoride toxicity can lead to a wide variety of health problems, including increased lead absorption, lowered IQ in children, hyperactivity or lethargy, muscle disorders, gastroenterological problems, arthritis, dementia, bone deformations and fractures, thyroid disease and lowered thyroid function, bone cancer, osteosarcoma, inactivation of 62 enzymes and inhibition of more than 100, inhibited formation of antibodies, genetic damage and cell death, increased tumor and cancer rate, disrupted immune system, impaired glucose intolerance, damaged sperm and increased infertility, increased cardiovascular risk, severe tooth enamel fluorosis, enamel loss and pitting, and delayed tooth development in children. We urge everyone to vote with your dollars and stop purchasing fluoride products. We also invite you to join the fight to get fluoride out of drinking water. Water fluoridation is a form of mass medication that denies you the right to informed consent. Fluoride is difficult to remove from drinking water once it's been added. Very few water filters reduce it significantly. The best way to truly exercise your right to not ingest this toxin is to prevent it from being added to the water supply in the first place. You can learn more and get involved in the effort to get fluoride out of the American water supply by joining the Fluoride Action Network online. Another toxic element against which we must guard is aluminum. You may have heard that aluminum increases your risk for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But did you know that the aluminum found in your municipal water supply can cause a wide variety of other health problems, including hyperactivity, learning disabilities, gastrointestinal disease, skin problems, Parkinson's, and liver disease? There is way too much aluminum in our health and beauty products, hygiene products, cookware, silverware, etc., kitchens.
Bought a book many years ago on the food industry. It's probably 30 years ago or so, and I just could not believe back then what they were doing. And actually, it started with candy, and when they were starting how to figure out a process for the frozen TV dinners and such. Yeah, things really changed around that time.
We have been ignorantly blissful while suffering from a wild increase of diseases. And it is time, it is long past time to wake up and arm ourselves with accurate information. Arsenic is another element against which we must guard ourselves. Arsenic is a poisonous element, a powerful carcinogen, cancer-causing agent. It has been linked to an increased risk of the development of several types of cancer. The Natural Resources Defense Council estimates as many as 56 million Americans living in 25 states drink water that contains unsafe arsenic levels. For more information, you can visit the website of the U.S. Geological Survey. It offers maps showing where and to what extent arsenic naturally occurs in groundwater across the United States. Arsenic is not easily removed by most carbon filters, but can be removed by reverse osmosis filters and distillation. Prescription and OTC drugs, unwanted or expired prescription and over-the-counter OTC drugs that have been discarded in the trash or flushed down the toilets can end up in the public water supply. This practice has several possible outcomes. Drugs that were intended only for external application may be ingested, or vice versa. You are exposed to the contaminants in water when you shower or take a bath. Some individuals are allergic to drugs found in the water supply. People are exposed to many combinations of drugs that have never been tested for safety when combined. Pregnant women are exposed to drugs that could potentially harm an unborn child. Also, industrial waste products. In addition, chemical fertilizers and pesticides used by the farming industry are also washed into the water supply via rain runoff. Chemicals used in the controversial practice of fracking, which is used to harvest natural gas underground, can also find their way into your tap water. Water filtration systems. To obtain water that is virtually toxin-free, the best choice is to invest in a water filtration system. They come in several different types. We'll review some here and weigh the pros and cons of different ones. Reverse osmosis filter. A reverse osmosis filter will remove chlorine and the inorganic and organic contaminants in your water. It will also remove about 80% of the fluoride in most of the DBPs. But again, the best way to have fluoride-free water is to not put it in the first place. Like distillation, RO, or reverse osmosis filtration, creates a fairly acidic water, and also, like distillation, it strips the water of minerals. So it is important to add in a few drops of trace minerals, which you can buy in a bottle from a health food store, before consuming your filtered water. The major drawback of reverse osmosis is the expense of installation. Typically, a plumber is required, but a number of RO systems don't require a plumber, which can automatically cut the cost down. Another major drawback is that the reverse osmosis filtration process is relatively slow. Unless you have a pump to help force water through the membrane faster, it may take a few minutes to fill a glass of water. RO systems can also be relatively inefficient. Many models will use 5 gallons of water to create 1 gallon of filtered water. Cleaning may also become a problem. The systems usually use 1 to 5 gallon holding tanks, which have to be regularly cleaned so they don't become contaminated with mold. But a number of RO systems have come on the market that have no holding tank, so you can store the water directly in a glass container, which can be regularly cleaned more easily. Carbon filters. Granule carbon and carbon block filters are the most common types of countertop and under-counter water filters. The EPA recognizes granular activated carbon as the best available technology for the removal of organic chemicals like herbicides, pesticides, and industrial chemicals. Granular carbon systems are far easier to use than reverse osmosis systems with holding tanks, but they don't filter the water as well, and most remove very little fluoride. Whole house systems are much larger than countertop models. They are about 1/4 the size of a typical water heater when installed. The larger the filter, the more toxins it removes. They are typically installed close to the main water supply of the house. The inexpensive pre-filters are changed once a month or so based on the water quality in your area. The main primary filter will last for 5 years or more, depending on how much you use it. While this is a more expensive option combined with a water restructuring device, it will give you some of the healthiest water you can drink. Despite the fact that we shared, it does not remove as much of the toxins as reverse osmosis, and certainly not as much as a water distiller. Water distillers are the most efficient in removing all toxins. Distilled water is very pure and free of contaminants, but like reverse osmosis water, it has lost virtually all of its beneficial minerals. Since water does not like this imbalance, it seeks to replace the lost minerals by using the ones in your body to fill the void, which can lead to mineral deficiencies. However, you can prevent this from happening and still enjoy the very pure water from a water distiller by simply adding back some trace minerals to the filtered water, either with a few drops of trace minerals from a bottle or a pinch of natural Himalayan salt, which naturally contains minute levels of many important minerals. As we've shared, it's also important to use a shower filter if you don't have a whole house filter. When you take a shower, water comes in contact with your skin, which is your largest organ of your body. And it also comes in contact with your lungs as you breathe in the steam. When that water is contaminated, it can cause even more damage than drinking a glass of it when it is used to bathe in. Shower filters are far less expensive than many drinking water filters. Another alternative is a whole house filter, as we've said, which has the added benefit of removing contaminants from the water you use to brush your teeth, take a bath, drink, and cook with, too. Installing a shower filter will significantly reduce your chemical exposure. For the rest of your life, it will spare your body in numerous ways. Your body won't have to detox those chemicals, your hormones won't be disrupted, and your risk of developing environmentally triggered diseases will be greatly reduced.